Story 1. I screwed up Ron Howard's lunch order one time. He and his family were golfing, and I worked in the golf club bar when they came in for a quick bite to eat. Not a single thing went right, but they were all extremely nice and understanding. 10 out of 10 would embarrass myself in front of them again. Story 2. I used to be a triangle messenger, a bicycle messenger in Pittsburgh, and would deliver scripts to WQED, the local broadcast channel. One day, I'm inside delivering a package, and none other than Fred Rogers walks up and introduces himself. He introduced himself to me. Not only that, he was very engaging, asking questions, a true, kind individual. About a month later, I am back at the studios delivering another package, and Mr. Rogers yells across the lobby, "Hey, my name." I'm floored. Here is this guy, totally in the moment, being a human being. He was authentic and truly wished to engage with me on a personal level. I will never forget the heart that guy had. From what I have been told, he was this way 100%. A true human. Story 3. I was teaching and took my class to Ellis Island and the September 11th Museum. A kid said Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is on our ferry coming back from the island. It was actually him. I took a deep breath and went over to him and his agent and said I had 50 students that would absolutely love to meet you if you can. He stood out in the rain, said hello, and took pictures with all my students. He walked down the street afterward and was high-fiving people who recognized him. Class act. Story 4. My first job was working for Steve Irwin at his zoo. I got to meet him many times before he died. Edit. Yes, I get it, haha. Good, I met him before he died. I originally wrote that I worked at his zoo before he died, then added in extra words and left that in, probably should not have. Story 5. Dave Gilmore from Pink Floyd flew into my small hometown to buy my mother's ex-boyfriend's Mustang airplane. I honestly didn't know who he was. My best friend was a big fan and thought I was joking until he saw him. It was the end of November, and he actually joined my mother's family for Thanksgiving dinner. Story 6. I met Mike Tyson at the airport and shook his hand. His hand wrapped fully around mine with some room to spare, and I got the sense just from the strength in his grip and handshake that he could have easily flung me over his head with just one hand and not thought twice about it. It was the most power I have ever come in contact with. He was a nice dude, though. Story 7. Met Matt Damon. Had a brief conversation with him while he was getting his wig glued on during the production of a film. Spent real time with Pedro Pascal. Took Pedro Pascal out for drinks and dinner in Beijing. Dude is the nicest guy ever. Edit. Well, this blew up. I've added a link below to an audio clip he sent my friend back in the States. The woman's voice is his manager. The guy drunkenly going, "Oh my God," in the background is me. Story 8. I met Snoop Dogg and he signed an album I bought from him. He called me Young Tiger Woods and then told me that he would see me at the top. He said he would be there waiting for me. As a musician, I was over the moon. And yes, he smelled like straight gas. Story 9. Johnny Cash. He was mountainous, dignified, genuinely humble. Didn't hurt that I got to meet Waylon Jennings, June Carter Cash, and Jesse Coulter at the same time. June had mesmerizingly beautiful eyes. Story 10. When John Wayne went to the local drugstore, he would buy all the kids an ice cream cone. One time, I asked for a triple scoop. He handed it to me and I promptly dropped it. He looked down at me, shook his head a little, smiled and said, "Sorry, little lady, now you only get 2 scoops," and bought me another cone. John Wayne called me little lady. Story 11. Robert Plant. He was staying in the hotel room next to mine, and he asked to come in to see my room, as it was the nicest suite in the hotel. We chit-chat and went down the elevator together. He was very nice. Story 12. I met Dixie Carter. She was in the bread aisle at Walmart as my friend and I were passing. I said to them, "There's Dixie Carter." They said, "No, it isn't." I said, "Yes, it is. Hold on." At that point, I calmly walked back, kept at least 6 feet between us, and said, "Excuse me, are you Dixie Carter?" She looked up from the loaf of bread she was considering and replied, "Yes, I am." I then turned around and said to my friend, "I told you." And that was the extent of that. Story 13. Once went to a friend's family barbecue and Stephen Hawking was there. I didn't realize and went to stand outside as those wheelchairs take up a fair bit of space. Turns out their mom was his nurse. Story 14, Rosa Parks. A few members of my high school band got to play a little concert for her. I have no idea how the school arranged that, but it was very cool. Story 15. I met Bill Clinton in 1999. I got to shake his hand and had a picture taken. We then watched him deliver his weekly radio address. He was really nice and looked incredibly tired. Story 16, Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown. They lived in the same building as my grandma in the 90s. They got on the elevator my friend and I were on. He and I looked at each other like, oh my goodness. Before we got out, I said to Whitney, we really like your music. And she said, thank you. Bobby was just standing there the whole time with shades on. Story 17. This will probably get buried. When I was a kid, my mom got me into the best public school where I lived, despite being out of the district. She'd take me every morning to a drop-off point outside of an expensive gated community in Los Angeles, where my friend's brother picked me up and drove me every morning to school. One morning, my mom noticed a black Mercedes behind us. This became a daily occurrence. She goes, holy crap, that's Mick Fleetwood. My parents were obsessed with Fleetwood Mac. In typical mom fashion, she gets out to go talk to him one morning and, of course, tells her life story. A few weeks later, business as usual, but I notice Mick get out of the car that day. He walks up to our window with a beautiful photo of Fleetwood Mac, signed by everyone in the band with a personal message to my dad, who was in the hospital after a near-fatal motorcycle accident. It was the nicest and most kind gesture, and I'll always remember that. I need to find that picture and post it. Story 18. Seth Rogen. My girlfriend and I were walking through Central Park. A couple with a dog were walking towards us, and my girlfriend, a mad dog person, complimented their dog. They stopped so she could pet it, and I started making conversation with the guy. He had sunglasses and a hat on, so I couldn't recognize him. But once he laughed, it clicked, and I accidentally blurted out, holy shit, you're Seth Rogen. He was charming, friendly, and amused that it was his dog that got the initial attention and not him. We got a photo with him and the dog and then went about our day. Story 19. I met Post Malone once. Dude was exactly like you would imagine. Chill, wearing a hoodie, and covered in tattoos. I tried to ask for a picture but got too nervous and just ended up awkwardly nodding at him. He nodded back. That's basically a vibe exchange, right? Story 20. Keanu. Twice. Once in 2000 as an intern on his movie Hardball. And then again in 2023 when I got to interview him. The rumors are true. He really is the nicest guy on the planet. Story 21. Mine is probably not as interesting as everyone else's, but I quite literally grew up with Robert Goulet. My mom was friends with him, and we would go to his home for dinners and holidays. He gave me my very first kitten. I think I have some photos of me in a Winnie the Pooh costume with him and his family at his home. I was too young to realize what a celebrity even was. My mom used to work for Epic Records, and she met tons of celebrities. She has many stories about people like Michael Jackson and Ozzy Osbourne. Far before my time, though. Story 22. Al Pacino in the late 1990s. He was doing an off-Broadway play called Huey, and got to meet him several times. He was super nice, stayed around to chat, take pictures, and sign autographs. Story 23. Princess and was presenting graduation at a university, and I went to see my mom get her degree when I was 4 years old. We were running late, my brother, my granddad, and I, and we got there as she was being let in. She noticed my shoelace was undone and told me to be careful and not trip over. So, I've had royalty tell me to tie my shoelace, which is kind of cool. Story 24. I used to attend private screenings at Skywalker Ranch. Didn't know people would be so excited about it, haha. Skywalker Ranch has its own team of police and firefighters that secure the ranch, of which my dad was one of the chiefs. My dad was super friendly, helpful, and just a chill guy altogether, so we were invited multiple times during my childhood to hang out at the ranch. Sometimes we would go on tours of the property and old movie prop buildings since George Lucas still had all of them, go to movie screenings he would host at the ranch, or just hang out and take in the peaceful scenery. My favorite was always the library, the most beautiful 2 to 3 story library with all of his favorite books that inspired him, with a beautiful twirling staircase. I also loved his peacocks that would roam the property fluffing out their tails. And in the main house, he has the original Indiana Jones hat and whip encased and on display, as well as the original lightsabers and all of the awards he has won over the years. Not every movie he showed was a winner, but it wasn't about the movie, it was about just hanging out at the ranch. Probably one of my favorite memories, although now I've moved out of the area. I haven't been there in years. Story 25. Frank Buckles became the last living United States veteran of World War I in 2008 after the second-to-last veteran passed away. I guess he only became famous after that. He was 107 when I met him, and he had been in the news because he was now the last World War I veteran. He happened to live about 30 minutes away, so I found his number and gave him a call. His daughter was setting up appointments since he was receiving a lot of requests around that time, and I got to spend the afternoon with him. He had some pretty great stories, especially about what happened after the war. He was actually a prisoner of war during the Second World War. Story 26. I filled Jerry Springer's water glass once when I was a busboy in a small northern Michigan town. As luck would have it, I am not my brother's father. Story 27. Winston Churchill. In 1959, on the island of Barbados, I was taken out of school at the age of 7 years. I was wondering why I was brought to see this miserable-looking old man. I had no idea about the history of the man. Story 28. I met Ringo Starr. I was on crutches with a broken ankle at a store, and he was there with his wife. As I was trying to grab something off the shelf, I wobbled and almost fell. He noticed me, quickly grabbed my crutches from behind to stabilize me, and said, "Easy, love." He touched my crutches. It was surreal. I still kept the crutches after I healed because of that. Story 29. John Delancey is best known for portraying the character Q from the Star Trek series. In 2016, while waiting at a gate at Los Angeles International Airport for a plane, he struck up a conversation with me. He was incredibly polite. Story 30. Vanda Sikis. 2016. She came to the cosmetic counter where I worked. Told me she lost all of her makeup on her last trip and needed all new products. She was going on the Ellen show that Friday. I sold her over $700 worth of new makeup. She was very down to earth and kind to all who stopped to say hello. She's a tiny little thing. I made a joke as she left and had her laughing. Great experience. Story 31. I used to have a small cable television show and would interview celebrities as they walked past us in a line. Arnold Schwarzenegger. All business, no wasted words. Jay Leno. Very funny and friendly. Robert Duvall. Didn't talk much, had to work to get him to talk. Paul McCartney. Asked him 3 questions at a press conference. Sweet guy. Even the other celebrities were starstruck. Robin Williams. I didn't meet him, but he made fun of me from the stage. At an Earth Day event, I had a camera with a short lens and was next to a guy with a long lens. He pointed at me and said, "This guy has lens envy." And the whole Hollywood Bowl laughed. A cherished memory. Story 32. Most of the famous hockey players from the 90s, I worked for a beer company. But the one that stands out was in the 70s. I met Bobby fishing on a bridge in Fenelon Falls. He was very kind to little me. Story 33. Michael Keaton was walking in Point State Park back in 2018. I saw him and yelled, "Hey, Mike!" He stopped, and I got a photo and told him that even though most people associate him with Batman and Beetlejuice, he will always be Mr. Mom to me. He laughed. Story 34. Back in 2008, I won a national sales contest where the grand prize was an all-expense-paid trip to Los Angeles to meet David Beckham. Sometime between the start of the contest and its award, David Beckham was loaned out to AC Milan, and rather than cancel the grand prize, Motorola simply changed the destination of the prize. So, I ended up meeting David, along with about 20 other people, at a fancy hotel in Milan, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy. 10 out of 10. Story 35. My parents work in the film industry. My dad worked primarily with Tom Cruise from 2002 to 2017, and they became close, although my dad is not a Scientologist. I have spent many hours with Tom Cruise and his older kids as a result. I cannot speak to anyone else's experience but my own, but Tom has always been extremely kind and generous to the people around him. One of the crew on Night and Day had a child with medical issues and had to miss a lot of work while their child was in the hospital. Instead of reacting negatively like other major celebrities I've been around, Tom quietly paid for every cent of that child's medical expenses and never mentioned it to anyone. He still sends us the Tom Cruise cake on Christmas and sends me a card on my birthday, despite not having seen him in about a decade at this point. Story 36. Steven Tyler. He came into the Harley-Davidson shop where I worked. He asked if the powdered creamer at the coffee station was Coffee Mate and told me he hadn't had that stuff in forever. Then we talked about motorcycles. He was very cool. Story 37. I met Christian Bale at an airport once. I was working and he was obviously a passenger. I wanted to just say hey, but my coworker buddy was like, "Oh my gosh, man. I love your movies. Let me get a photo." And he was visibly annoyed. I took the picture quickly, apologized, and wished him a safe flight as he turned to go to his gate. I know I'd hate to be hounded in public if I were famous, so I'd never ask someone going about their normal life to stop on my behalf. Story 38. David Tennant. Really nice guy, super hyper and happy. Danny Trejo was walking around a convention. I said, "Oh my God, it's you," which gave him a chuckle and gave me a fist bump,